All right, so are you ready to dive into prepping for a leather wet processing department manager interview? We're going deep today, using RoleCatcher's career and interview guides to get you ready for this specific role.
It's a role that's super important, but doesn't always get the attention it deserves. You're not just managing people, you're transforming those rawhides, making the decisions on the chemicals and processes and how it all affects the quality.
Okay, so RoleCatcher starts off with a question that seems simple. What experience do you have in leather wet processing? Seems pretty basic, right?
Yeah, but don't fall into the trap of just listing off your past jobs. They're looking for more here. Did you really learn and understand the details of wet processing? Like, did you go beyond just following instructions and actually learned about the different stages the chemicals use, the impact on the final product?
So instead of just saying, I worked at this tannery for this many years, I should talk about times when I went above and beyond. Like maybe I took a course on wastewater treatment or tried out different liming techniques.
Exactly. Show them you're not just there to do the job, but that you're curious and you like to solve problems. And that's where RoleCatcher's AI comes in. It can analyze the specific job description and point out the skills and experiences that this particular employer is looking for.
So I can tailor my answers to exactly what they need,
Yeah.
not just general knowledge.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the next question I should be ready for?
Let's talk about managing a team. You'll probably get asked something like, what is your experience in managing a team in a fast-paced production environment?
Ah, the classic leadership question. It sounds like they're really stressing that fast-paced part, though.
Exactly. Think about it from their perspective. Wet processing is the first step. Any delays there mess up everything else. They need someone who can keep things running smoothly and make sure the quality stays high.
So I should talk about times I handled pressure well, like maybe when we had a rush order or a machine broke down and I had to get the team to meet the deadline without messing up the quality. Exactly. And don't just talk about what you did. Tell them how you motivated the team, how you assigned tasks, and maybe even how you got creative to solve the problem. They want to see you as a leader, not just a manager.
Got it. Lead, don't just manage. What else should I be prepared for?
Environmental regulations. This is huge in the leather industry, and it's only getting more important. So be ready for a question like, how do you ensure compliance with environmental regulations in the leather wet processing process?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of talk about sustainability and the environment when it comes to tanneries,
Yeah.
but I'm not a lawyer. How much detail do they expect?
They don't want you to quote the law word for word, but they do want to see that you understand the reasoning behind the regulations and how they affect your work as a department manager.
So I should know about the major regulations where I live, like wastewater limits, hazardous waste disposal, air quality stuff. And I should know how to make sure my team is following those rules.
Exactly. And think about being proactive, not just reactive. How would you train your team, monitor things, and maybe even suggest ways to make things better for the environment? Show them you're not just following rules, but that you're committed to doing things the right way.
That makes sense. It's not just about checking boxes, but showing I understand the bigger picture. What's next?
Let's talk about underperforming employees. This is something every manager has to deal with at some point. So the question might be, how would you address a situation where a team member is consistently not meeting performance expectations?
That's a tough one. Nobody likes having that conversation. What do they want to hear in my answer?
They're looking for balance. You need to be firm, but also show empathy. They want to see that you won't avoid the problem, but that you'll deal with it in a positive way. Think of a specific example from your own experience.
So I could talk about a time I noticed someone was struggling, and instead of just yelling at them, I tried to figure out what was going on. Maybe they needed more training, or something was going on in their personal life, or they weren't sure what they were supposed to be doing.
Exactly. And then tell them what you did. Did you give them feedback? Did you set goals? Did you offer support? Did you keep track of everything? It's about helping the employee get better, not just punishing them.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. It's not just about what I've done in the past, but also how I think and approach problems.
Exactly. And that's where RoleCatcher's AI feedback can really help. You can practice your answers, either typing them out or saying them out loud, and the AI will give you tips on how to make your point stronger and avoid common mistakes.
It's like having a personal coach, which is pretty cool. Okay, I'm ready for the next one. Hit me with it.
All right, let's talk about quality control. It's super important in the wet processing department.
Of course. It's the foundation for everything else. So a question about that could be,
Something like, what specific quality control measures would you implement in the wet processing department to ensure consistency and meet the required standards?
okay, this is where I can really show off my knowledge of the process I would talk about.
Hold on, let's save that for part 2. We've covered a lot already, and I don't want to rush through it.
You're right. We'll be back soon with more insights and tips to help you rock that interview.
Welcome back. We were just about to dig into that quality control question. Remember, wet processing is the start of everything, so any problems there can have a big impact later on.
Exactly. So back to the question. What specific quality control measures would you implement in the wet processing department to ensure consistency and meet the required standards? I'm ready to get into it.
Great. Now remember, they don't just want a list of general checks. They want to know how you'd use your knowledge of the process and the challenges to make sure the quality is top-notch.
Okay, so I could start by talking about the key stages where quality control is super important. Like checking the rawhides for problems when they come in, making sure the liming process gets rid of all the hair, checking the pH levels during deliming and baiting. All those steps affect the final quality.
Perfect. And for each stage, you should have specific ways to check the quality. How would you inspect the hides? What tools or methods would you use to keep an eye on the chemical baths? Would you use something like statistical process control to track important variables and spot any trends?
Right. I could even talk about specific tests for leather quality. Things like tensile strength, tear resistance, and color fastness. Showing them I know about those industry standards would definitely make a good impression.
Absolutely. And don't forget about keeping good records. A good quality control system needs detailed records. Mention how you'd set up a system to track measurements, spot any deviations, and use the data to keep improving things.
That's a great point. Data is super important. Okay, I feel pretty confident about this question now. What else should we talk about?
Let's talk about safety. The wet processing department uses chemicals and heavy machinery, so safety is really important. They might ask you something like, how do you ensure the safety of your team in a potentially hazardous environment like the wet processing department?
Safety is always my top priority. So for this one, I talk about how I would create a culture of safety in the department. It's not just about following rules. It's about making sure everyone understands the risks and takes responsibility for their own safety and the safety of others.
That's great. Now, how would you put that into action? What specific safety procedures would you have in place? Would you have regular safety meetings? What about mandatory training for new employees? And how would you make sure everyone has the right protective equipment?
Right. I could also talk about things like regular safety audits, identifying potential hazards, and taking steps to fix them. Maybe even setting up a way for employees to report safety concerns anonymously without worrying about getting in trouble.
You're on the right track. And when you talk about safety, make sure you sound sincere and passionate. Interviewers can tell if you're just reading a script or if you really care about workplace safety.
I definitely care about it.
Mm-hmm.
No leather is worth risking someone's health.
Oh.
Okay, I'm ready for the next one. What else do I need to be ready for?
Let's talk about how you measure performance. They might ask, how do you measure and track the performance of the wet processing department to ensure efficiency and productivity?
Data again. We touched on that with quality control, but I guess this question is looking for a bigger picture view of performance.
Exactly. They want to see that you're not just focused on the day-to-day, but that you're thinking about how to make the whole department better. Think about the key performance indicators or KPIs that are important in wet processing.
Okay, so those could be things like throughput, how many hides are processed each day or each shift. Also, chemical usage. Are we using chemicals efficiently or is there a lot of waste? And of course, the overall cost of processing. Are we staying within budget and keeping costs down?
You got it. And how would you track those metrics? What tools or software would you use? Would you set up a dashboard to show the important trends and see where things could be improved?
Right. I could also talk about how I'd use this data to set goals for the team, track our progress, and find ways to make the process better. It's all about using data to make smart decisions.
Exactly. You're showing them that you're a data-driven manager who can use those skills to keep making things better. And remember, this is another place where RoleCatcher's AI can be a big help.
How so?
RoleCatcher's AI can analyze that specific job description and suggest KPIs that the employer cares about. It can also help you tailor your answers to talk about specific data tools or software that they use.
That's really helpful. It's like having a cheat sheet to know exactly what they're looking for. Okay, what other tough questions might they ask?
Let's talk about something every manager has to deal with: conflicting priorities. They might ask, how do you manage conflicting priorities in a demanding environment like the wet processing department?
Oh, I've definitely been there. You're trying to meet deadlines, keep the quality high, stay within budget, make sure everyone's safe, and then a machine breaks down or someone calls out sick. How do you decide what to do first?
That's exactly what they want to know, how you stay calm under pressure and make good decisions when things get crazy. What strategies do you use to prioritize tasks? Do you have a way to figure out what's urgent and what's important?
Okay, I could talk about different prioritization techniques I've used. Maybe a prioritization matrix to rate tasks based on urgency and importance. Or maybe a Kanban system to see the workflow and where things are getting stuck.
Great. But don't just name the techniques. Give them a real example of a time when you had to juggle different priorities and how you handled it. Walk them through your thought process, how you figured out what was going on, gathered information, talked to your team, and made the best decision.
Right. Show them I can actually solve problems. I'm seeing how important it is to think about my past experiences and find examples that show what I can do.
Exactly. Now let's move on to another question that comes up a lot.
Hold on, let's save that one for part 3. We've covered a lot in this section, and I don't want to overload our listener with too much information.
You're right. We want to make this information easy to understand and use. We'll be back soon with more interview tips and tricks to help you get that dream job.
Okay, we're back for the last part of our leather wet processing department manager interview prep. Are you feeling ready to go out there and impress those interviewers?
You should be. Remember, these questions are about more than just what you've done. They also want to see how you think, how you solve problems, and how you lead.
Right. It's about showing them you're not just there to punch a clock, but that you're passionate about this industry.
Exactly. And speaking of passion, here's a question where you can really show that off. What are some current trends or innovations in the leather industry that you find particularly interesting and why?
Ooh, I like this one. It lets me step back from the everyday stuff and talk about the big picture. What are they looking for here?
They want to see that you're paying attention to what's happening in the industry, that you're keeping up with new things, and that you're excited about the future of leather manufacturing.
Okay, so I shouldn't just list off random trends. I need to pick something I'm really interested in and be able to explain why it matters.
Exactly. Think about the trends that fit with your career goals and the company you're interviewing with. Are they focused on sustainability? Then you could talk about things like waterless tanning or bio-based chemicals. Are they a high fashion brand? Then you might talk about new leather finishing techniques or using exotic leathers.
Right, it's about showing that I know what's going on A&D, that I'm thinking about how those trends could affect the company and the whole industry.
Exactly. And this is another area where RoleCatcher's AI can be a big help. It can look at the company's website, news articles, industry reports, and figure out which trends and innovations are most important to them.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like having a whole research team working for me.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What's next?
Let's talk about inventory management. They might ask something like, how do you approach inventory management in the wet processing department to ensure a smooth flow of materials while minimizing waste and costs?
Okay, this one seems pretty simple. It's about keeping things balanced right, making sure we have enough rawhides and chemicals, but not too much so we're not wasting money.
That's part of it. But they also want to see if you understand the challenges of inventory management in wet processing. Rawhides can go bad, and some chemicals have a limited shelf life.
Right, so I should talk about my experience with inventory systems, forecasting techniques, and maybe even supplier relationships, showing that I can plan ahead, order things at the right time, and minimize waste would be important.
Exactly. And don't forget about cost. How would you work with suppliers to get the best prices? How would you set up systems to track chemical usage and find ways to save money?
Okay, I get it. It's not just about keeping track of inventory. It's also about being smart with money and resources.
You got it. Now for our last question, let's talk about something that's super important for any manager. Communication, they might ask. How do you ensure effective communication within the wet processing department and with other departments within the company?
Communication is definitely key, especially in a busy production environment where everyone depends on each other. What are they really trying to figure out with this question?
They want to see that, how important it is to communicate clearly, concisely, and at the right time. They want to know if you can talk to your team, to upper management, and to other departments to make sure things run smoothly and to avoid costly mistakes.
Okay, so I could talk about my communication style.
Mm.
I'm a big believer in being open and honest.
Mm.
I would have regular team meetings to talk about what's going well, what challenges we're facing, and any new ideas. I'd also keep upper management updated and let other departments know if there's anything that might affect them.
Great. And think about different ways to communicate. Would you set up a digital system to share information and track progress? Would you use visuals or dashboards to make it easier to understand important data?
Right, and I definitely talk about being a good listener. It's not just about talking, it's also about listening to your team, understanding their concerns, and creating an environment where people feel comfortable speaking up.
That's exactly it. Good communication is the foundation of a successful team and a successful business.
Okay, I feel much better about answering these questions. But before we wrap up, let's talk about RoleCatcher's AI tools one more time. How can they help our listener get ready for their interview?
RoleCatcher's AI can analyze that specific job description and find the most important skills, experience, and keywords. Then it can help you tailor your resume cover letter and even your answers to focus on those things.
And don't forget about that AI feedback on practice answers. It's like having your own interview coach right there on your phone, giving you tips and suggestions.
It's a fantastic tool that can give you a real edge when you're looking for a job.
Well, I think we've covered everything you need to know to ace that leather-wet processing department manager interview. Any last words of advice?
Remember, the interview goes both ways. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. Go in with confidence, be ready to ask good questions, and make sure it's a job and a company that's a good fit for you.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us, and good luck with your interview.